Hey everybody, it's Booksy. I'm going to talk about ATER, ATER, and just give you the daily update and what I think is going on in the stock. Why it's not over yet, but I think we're getting pretty close to the bottom here. I'm going to start on the macro and just show you something that I just noticed today, which is that in this particular very large wedge that we're in, which I do view as I don't know if you've heard me talk about that gator snap pattern where you have a W breakout, 1-1, and then you form a wedge, and then you have a down break and another W. And this has happened over and over and over again on this stock since the beginning of the stock. And I have other videos about that, about the ATER cycle. It's an important pattern for you to know because if you don't know it, then moves like this, where it breaks down and does this W, seem very irregular and odd. And then you might even look at these and not see it, but the pattern plays out here as well, right? And that's why I bring it up a lot, because it's just this reoccurring, really important pattern on this stock. And usually when you see these breaks, it comes back to sort of retest the region. Almost always see this, retest these lines, and then it starts all over again. And we've been in this really long, ever since this big push, right? This was like a 500% a month or whatever. We've been in this kind of massive sort of retracement sell-off. And if you look at the macro, meaning you zoom out, I'm pretty confident about this, just in terms of looking at the fact that this started around the first COVID, and we've had a lot of stocks that are running accumulation schematics off of COVID, basically off that big giant drop that we almost all the stocks experienced, right? And if you look at this, it's in a bit of an upward channel, and then you consider this as like the spring. So if you're into Wyckoff, you'll know these phases, but essentially you have a distribution up top, and then we have this spring, and this spring is massive. And after the spring comes the test. And when you look at this region, the volume uptick is just astronomically high. And this is what this is absurd, right? This is what I'm going to delete these lines. Just extra. This is what it looks like, right? And this is a major bump in on-balance volume, and it's a huge deviation, okay? And if you were to look at just charting, if you're just charting these two right here, all right, then you have to say that this right here is, look at from basically the top down, just look at the divergence there. This has been a long downtrend, right? You can take a line and just draw it like straight down, right? Been in a very long downtrend, but the on-balance volume is just astronomically high. Look at this. It's just ridiculous. So I think that when this finally does go, we are going to see it move. And I've talked about that in other videos, but I just want to bring that up again, because when you're in the weeds like we were today again, it can be really frustrating, and you want answers, but it doesn't seem like anything's changing. And part of the reason why it doesn't seem like anything's changing is because we are literally repeating the same fractal over and over and over again on smaller and smaller time frames, and it feels like we're kind of in a weird black hole, right? Like we're being sucked to the bottom here, and it's like creating like some kind of weird singularity, right? Where it's just going forever and ever and ever down. I don't think it's going to go forever and ever down. I think that eventually something's going to give, because even if it came down to this low again or near it, right, it doesn't need to come all the way down to the bottom here. And I know that there's folks who are like, no, this stock's, maybe not as good as everyone says it is, and all this stuff. But fundamentally, this stock is fine. Like the business is correcting, and I'm not going to get into that because it's not really my area of expertise. And I'm just saying that, like, I know that it's okay. Like, this is not a company that's about to go bankrupt. And so that being said, like, we're talking about purely technical analysis here. And on a purely technical level, what we want to have happen is we want to see this kind of move and like break out. And once it breaks out, I do think, yeah, it's going to be pretty violent. I can't see how it would not be. Like, just the amount of volume that was pumped into this thing, the unbalanced volume, everything. The fact that we've been in this very long push down, but look at the volume. It's just completely dried up. And even on smaller and smaller and smaller time frames, it's just very, very, very dry. And this right here, this region right here, where we got this push, I actually think it's really healthy, because if you look at like this push right here, which I think was the earnings push, it just kind of, it was a very sharp peak and then it just sort of fell off. And if you look at all of these regions where you get these strong push-ups, you know, they're kind of give and take. I mean, this one's pretty small. But this right here, I think the fact that we've been drying out for so long and they're still pushing it down on very, very low volume, this to me is like the sign of something waking up, right? Now, I'm not saying that tomorrow this thing is going to go flying, but I do think that if you look at this iteration, right, everything gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And then right here, this one's a little larger. It opens up a bit. And I noticed a pattern today. I just wanted to share it with you that in this wedge, okay, you've got repeating gator snaps, right? They're tail to tail here. And every time that this happens, okay, you get this W breakout. And there's always a breakdown. And what I noticed is that they alternate. So in this one, the breakdown is the bottom, and then we run to the top, and then we kind of sit in the middle. Then we do the bottom, we run to the top, and then sort of sit in the middle, bottom, run to the top, and sit in the middle. So what would come next would probably look something like this if we end up repeating. Okay, it's probably going to end up looking something like this, because that's where we would be next, right? We would be heading towards a bottom one. So my expectations are not, I'm not trying to say it needs to do this. I'm just saying that if it's going to continue, then likely like this is what it's going to look like. Okay. You'll start getting excited, it'll push up, and then it'll have like a sudden sell off, and then it'll basically set itself up on a T to create a new consolidation. But that being said, you know, if we were looking at just the distances between these bottoms, this is clearly a sign that we're coming to, right, the end. Because as you're getting near the bottom, right, these are getting closer and closer and closer together. And not only that, but I noticed in another section that this right here, this fractal, this whole fractal, the big one, right, the big move, is the same as this fractal right here. And I think that's important because if you look at, oh, it's not even on here anymore, is it? Bummer, I must not have saved it. If you look at the, kind of zoom out, we'll get to it. Okay, and you just look at this move. The fractal themselves are pretty much one-to-one right here, and that to me is interesting. And I noticed that this fractal doesn't look like this at first, and it's kind of a tough one. But if you stare at it long enough, you will actually see it. So this looks like a reverse head and shoulder, but it's made up of 1, 2, 3, and it's still there. It's just ugly. And you have to remember, this was designed as one of those drop downs to sort of touch bottom. And then it was meant to just kind of keep going up. It ended up having this odd second bump here, which kind of tipped me off to like, maybe this is the same. And it is. And so it's playing out on a micro scale right here, what we saw on a macro scale from August to now. And so if you were to look at this particular price action, you can see it. You see what I mean? So essentially, what this is telling me right now is that I think this right here, I'm not saying it's the same as this, but it's unique in that it's playing out exactly the same way. And I found this sort of test interesting, right? Because of like where everything is lining up. And if you look at this drop and then come back up here, right? It's kind of at this level. And I'm really interested if it breaks out here, if it breaks out and starts moving, which is kind of what I expected to do. But, you know, I want to say that if you look here, it might end up going sideways a bit. And that would be because of, you know, maybe like a sell where it rides down a little and then it comes back up and it tests that line, then it sits underneath it, breaks out, right? And then this region might end up being like that 540 something, pretty close. And that's where we want to see what happens next. Essentially, that's what I'm looking for. So I'm looking at that 540 region. I want to see if it can get up over that. If it does and it breaks up and heads towards the top here, then I think it's pretty much a confirmed reversal, because it shouldn't, right? Like it shouldn't do that. If it's on this lower bottom pattern, then we shouldn't see it touch the top. And I'm pretty confident about that just because it's the way this has been playing out. And then also just knowing that this right here, if you think about it, this is like an extension of these points of contact, these 1, 2, 3, 4 points of contact, then it follows that perhaps this is like kind of the main, let me draw this, liquidity zone, okay? And that's a way we should probably start looking at this stock. Every time we see this drop, that we're creating these little liquidity zones, right? So if we look over here, we tried it on this. Yeah. And then you see how when you're getting back through it again, what happens? You end up just dropping through like really quickly. So it's found support right there again. And maybe you could even raise it up and say it's actually trying to get back out, and that's what this is. So there's just some different ways of looking at this price action. And so what I'm looking for now is to see what happens when we retest that liquidity zone. I think that's going to be the key for understanding maybe how to read the breakout coming. Because I think until it does break out, we are going to see it just like continually repeat. I guess indefinitely. I don't know. I can't go forever, and I don't see it going past. I really don't see it going past the spring. But there's a lot of room between $3 and $4.50. So we're gonna have to just kind of wait and see on it. But right now, I'm feeling pretty good about where we're sitting. I don't really see it as a big issue. So, anyways, that's my recap for today. Yeah, leave a comment if you want a question answered. I'll try to answer your question.